now. There we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Brigid Brennan. I do advocacy with Ron Bartek and Emma Potter, who are here. We're all here today, so if you have any questions from what the material I go over, please feel free to track any of us down. I think we need to start our conversation about what's happening in DC right now. So, hard topic to start with, I know. You know that the government is shut down. So what does that mean for FA research specifically? If you look at the NIH right now, that means they're not reviewing applications for grants. So any grant applications that an FA researcher has pending is just sitting on someone's desk. It's not getting a peer reviewed right now. At the FDA, they're not taking any new drug applications. And although we've heard about, and you're going to hear more about our pipeline, that there's some things coming up next year, you can imagine that in other rare diseases, there might have been something going in right now which would not be accepted while the government is shut down. So this shutdown has a direct impact on the efforts that we're making across the board on research. Some of you may be aware that the president signed an executive order back in August, and that directly impacts our research in that when an applicant puts in a grant application to the NIH, it's reviewed by people that are in their area of expertise, and they get a score. And the people that get the highest score get their grant awarded. It's called peer reviewed. They also get feedback on what did they do well in their grant application and what areas might they need to work on to resubmit an application later. And that's been sort of the tested, tried, and true way to do grants. The president has now put a person above the peer review process. It's a political appointee that's going to have to sign off on those grants that score really high. We don't know what that means as far as our applications go because the process hasn't really taken place yet. But we're going to be following it because we want to make sure whoever's reviewing that is still taking the best scientific grants and funding those in FA research. And then back in July, some of you may have heard that the big, beautiful bill passed, and that's going to have some changes in the Medicaid process. And so although Medicaid is a piece of access that we're concerned about, it's still a very big part of what our community deals with. We are staying on top of those changes. You're going to see what's happening in the next year on a state level, and there may be opportunities that you can work with FARA within your own state and the changes that are being made across the country there. Read the newsletter to find out more. So how do we get our message to our lawmakers as a community? The first thing, I hope everyone in this room knows that we just had a United Against Ataxia Hill Day in September. So it was fabulous. We've been doing this in collaboration with the National Ataxia Foundation. It has been well received within both communities, but also on the Hill. People are very interested in hearing the stories that you are the experts in. You know, Ron, myself, and Emma put together the legislative package and the asks for the year, but really what impacts those meetings is for the legislators to hear from you and your stories. And when we can tie those stories on actions they can take when they leave that meeting, and to make your stories a little easier for the next person that's walking in that spot, or maybe to your prognosis a little easier, that's the change that we're looking for, right? So we had 169 advocates do through 38 states, so we still have room to grow. We don't have 50 yet. And we did 99 congressional meetings. Of course, top of our list is always funding for federal research institutes. We also talked about CDMRP and keeping hereditary ataxia on that. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So, and then we talked about two pieces of legislation. One was about the Priority Review Voucher Program, which was instrumental when OMAV was going through the pipeline. It gives incentives to drug developers to look at pediatric conditions. And the last one is dealing with pediatrics across state lines and making the process for caregivers and providers easier. So let's talk about the CDMRP. For those of you that are new and have not heard me speak about this before, there is a research program that is run in the Department of Defense. And every year, Congress gets to pick a list of conditions that they want the Department of Defense to fund research grants in. So that means every time Congress is making a budget, we have to go to Congress and we have to ask them to please put hereditary ataxia on that list. We were able to successfully do that back in 2022. And every year, with the help of so many people in this room, and those online, and those that weren't able to make it today, but that answered my phone calls or text messages, I need your help. We were able to keep hereditary ataxia on that list for 3 years. Because of that, our researchers received over $35 million of support in research grants. That's great news, but the hard part is it has to be done every year. This is a project that our community has to stay on top of, because if we don't, we can slip off the list and we may not be able to get back on. So we really work on it. And I want to show you kind of 2 short stories about why this really impacts our community. So first of all, Jen mentioned this morning that anything we're working on is all made possible through the grassroots efforts that we all do every day, every year, and has been going on for more than 25 years in our community. Those resources allow us to think about how do we push that rock uphill a little quicker. So at the end of 2022, Dr. David Lynch, who you heard speak earlier today, and Dr. Sanjay Bidichinani had a hypothesis. They thought maybe some people with identical sized expansions may only have one frataxin gene. And he's actually going to talk about this work later, so I'm not going to give you any great insight onto the research, but let me tell you what happened with the funding. So they came to FARA and they said, we have an idea, and we want to try to do some research here on this. And FARA was able to give them a grant to go out and take a look and see if they could get data on this. Now that money that came from that grant came from all the grassroots efforts of our community. That's what made the first jump into this research possible. And so they did that, and they actually came up with a surprise discovery, that there was a novel form of expansion, which you're going to hear about later. So then, armed with that data from the FA grant, they went to the CDMRP program, and they applied for a specific type of grant called the Impact Award, which requires a collaboration between a clinician, Dr. Lynch, and a lab researcher, Sanjay, right? So they came together, they said, we're going to work on this project together. And then they have the data from their FA grant, and as a result, they received a $2.8 million grant to do this study. This is all possible because of the grassroots, but also because of the CDMRP effort, right? So many people in our community filled out applications in the spring when the budget was first starting to ask their members of Congress, their 2 senators, their 1 House member, hey, I really want you to keep hereditary ataxia on the list. After we got all those applications in, then every time we had an opportunity to be in a legislator's office, we reminded them about how important it was, so that when they were looking at the budget, they were keeping that on the list. So this wasn't one person's effort. This wasn't even one person's grassroots effort or one person's CDMRP effort. This was really a lot of people doing a little piece that made this huge project come together. And I guess the researchers also helped too. They're pretty smart guys. So also, Jen mentioned this CDMRP grant earlier. So this is an example of something happening right now that you can get involved with. This was a result of a CDMRP grant. You guys made this possible. So I hope you take advantage and chat with the folks that are here about this project. And if it works for you, take a trip to Boston. Excited to tell you that Senator Hyde-Smith has been a champion for us. Every year she puts in a resolution in the Senate recognizing September 25th, which is International Ataxia Awareness Day. She asks the Senate to recognize it as National Ataxia Awareness Day. It's a little bit slow down in the Senate this year. As you can imagine, they're a little busy. But I'm happy to report that on Friday, the Senate passed this resolution recognizing that last September 25th was, in fact, National Ataxia Awareness Day. So our deep gratitude to Senator Hyde-Smith and her co-sponsors to make this possible every year. It just keeps the conversation there, right? A senator who's in that room listening to that vote is hearing about ataxia. At the same time, we're going into their office to say, hey, keep us on that CDMRP. It's just one more way to reinforce the need that we have in our community. Going forward, what's coming up that you guys can get involved with? February 28th is Rare Disease Day. There are so many programs you can do at your house. You can decorate your house. You can do social media. There are programs within your state. Many state capitals have rare disease programs. And then, of course, there's a big program run by the Every Life Foundation down in D.C. where you can go down to D.C. and meet with your members. While you're in DC, the FDA and the NIH often have rare disease days. We'll see what happens this year, but that's usually what happens. And sometimes they're even hybrid that you can watch at your own home. So there's lots of opportunities for you to jump in any way you want on Rare Disease Day. We'll update you in our newsletter, our advocacy newsletter, on all the activities and ways you can get involved. In addition to that, throughout the year, there are many, many advocacy events that happen, both through the National Organization of Rare Disease and the Every Life Foundation. We participate in all of them, and we try to facilitate with our community members that are interested in participating to help them with messaging so that you feel very comfortable and prepared in any of these. Some of these are virtual, some of these are in person, some happen at a state level, some happen at the federal level. But in addition to this, really important, you don't have to do an event. You can really reach out to your members at any time, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. Wanted to highlight here, Ron Bartek has made a tremendous effort over the last 2 years to highlight pediatric inclusion in trials. He ran a phenomenal work roundtable last summer. As a result, they formed a pediatric alliance of many partners, stakeholders across the board, industry partners, patient groups, academics, and they've been working on this issue, and they've been invited to come to the FDA this December for a meeting, and Ron's hoping that the second roundtable will happen next spring. So there's a lot of push to see how we can get pediatrics into clinical trials earlier, and I really commend Ron and all the work he's done in that. Just a little bit of a touching point here is we've come up with a few new resources for the community. This is a proclamation toolkit that our ambassador team worked with Emma on, and they did a fabulous job. A proclamation is something you could go to either your local or state official, a mayor or a governor, and ask them to recognize a particular day. It could be Rare Disease Day, it could be Ataxia Awareness Day, whichever day you would like to do. And they form a proclamation, and it's an official document they sign recognizing that day. All of the information's in the toolkit, not only how to do it, but there are links for every single state and what your requirement is in each state. I mean, Emma's done a fabulous job on this proclamation. So if you're interested in just doing something from home, but you want to kind of connect with your local officials, here's a great way to do it. In addition, we put together a speech toolkit. There's going to be a breakout session that's going to cover this more in depth, so I'm not going to cover it too much right now, but I want everyone to know that it's there. It's on the advocacy page, so if you're interested in getting to know a little bit more about the speech toolkit, come to our breakout session. I'm going to show you a little bit of a preview at the end of this session, and we'll go into it a lot more in the breakout. So how can you guys get involved? Well, sign up for the newsletter. We tell you every month to 6 weeks, we put one out that tells you kind of what are the events coming up, what are the issues happening in DC right now, ways that you can get involved, whether it's, go to an event or write an email. You can do a proclamation. You can also start building relationships with your members. And really, that's really the important thing. Some people have spoken to us feeling a little frustrated. I live in a state that's in a minority state. I don't feel like we have any power. I live in a state that's a majority state, but I don't feel I have any voice. They're not going to listen to what I have to say. You may not see the exact result of what you want tomorrow in either of those states, but building the relationship with your members allows them to actually hear what you need, right? What is happening in our community, in your life? And it's just like building a friendship, right? Your friends get to know you better. They kind of figure out what you need, what you like. Same thing with your members, right? I mean, I'm going to tell everyone that you should talk to Mary Nadine Scott, who has become best buddies with everybody in her state official offices. But it's really important because when they're considering budgeting or legislation, they have you now in their mind, right? They have a constituent who has a particular need, and they might see an opportunity to say something or do something that might move the needle for us that we didn't even think about. But your relationship with them caused that to happen. So think of it in the long game. Every time you get involved in an office, you may not walk out feeling like I won this meeting, but you might win the long game in that person becoming a champion for us down the road, especially as our champions start to retire and we need new champions. Your investment for a year, 2 years, 3 years, getting to know this member, they may be the person that's willing to stand up and do the resolution or help us pass legislation. So it's all time well vested. if you're interested, we have a QR code that will help you find your members. I believe it's also in the folders. You can kind of search with your address and it'll give you all of the information. I have a few minutes. I don't know if there's any questions before I have a short 2.5-minute video I want to wrap up with, but if anyone has a question, I'm happy to answer anything. Oh, good. Maybe we can go to the video and we'll go to breakout a little early since we have a photo.
This introductory video is going to provide you a brief overview of the purpose of the toolkit and its contents so that you can explore. So without further ado, let's talk FA and speech. Speaking to others is a critical part of sharing your story and advocating for both yourself and others. However, speaking in public, in general, or to people that you don't know can be scary. Being nervous or afraid to speak in public is normal. Around 75% of people report feeling anxious speaking in public. And in addition to typical nerves related to public speaking, speech issues related to FA may also contribute to anxiety. So why is this important in the first place? Well, I'm glad you asked, because speech is critical to advocacy. Advocacy isn't just talking to your legislators, it's actually so much more. It includes tons of other stuff, like self-advocacy, which is the process of communicating and negotiating your needs, wants, and rights. This can include things like asking for accommodations in school or at work, or telling your doctor your desires in regards to your medical treatment. Anytime you tell someone else what you want or need, that's self-advocacy in action. There are also so many other ways that you can advocate and share your story. Some of these include speaking at an event, creating music, speaking to a board or other committee, testifying on a piece of legislation, or serving on a board or advisory committee. Advocacy is critically important for a number of reasons. First and foremost, self-advocacy helps us be active decision makers in our lives and better meet our own wants and needs. But advocacy on a larger scale can make lawmakers aware of constituent needs, put a face and a story to important policy issues, and just generally serve as a catalyst for meaningful policy change. And with that in mind, it's important to remember that everyone's story is unique and deserves to be shared, and public speaking is one of the main ways to do so. FARA created this toolkit to hopefully help you feel more comfortable sharing your own unique story to create change. Once you start exploring, you'll find a presentation from a speech pathologist on FA and speech, as well as several one-pagers with relevant information and tips. Overall, we hope this toolkit will help you feel more confident speaking, whether it's in your personal life or on Capitol Hill.